It's fine.
You see people on.
I have to see myself. There must be a way for me to get rid of me.
Yeah, Rebbe, everyone hears you and everyone sees you, so we're good.
Oh, here I see the Chavra.
There
Okay,
you
good.
go.
Yeah. Why are you looking at the phone if you're driving?
Self-drive.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good. Just listen. Don't do anything else. That's not safe. Okay. I'm going to get straight to what I want to talk about, because we're not so far away from the Ribnitzer here. And this is really what I'm going to say now is really Hakadama, not only to what I'm going to be talking about over the next day and a half or so, but even through Shabbos and Yantif, it's really a Hakdama. It is a Hashgacha Pratis that we're beginning our trip by going back to this tzaddik. So let me just tell you a little bit background on who it is that we're who. I mean, he was an Ish Pella, a wonder. Reb Chaim Zanvil Abramovich was his name. I was lucky to see him 3 times. He was a famous, even though he was famous as a huge Baal Maifis, as a miracle worker, as a wonder worker, but he was Megala Tefach Umachasa a million Tvachim. What we know about him, and I know there's some book about it, an English book. I didn't read any of the books yet, but whatever it is, the little that we know, which is just absolutely astonishing. I'll just share with you a few things. I'll share with you a few things now in the next few minutes. The little we know about him is astonishing, but there's infinitely more much more that we don't know. We don't even know exactly the year that he was born. Akidei Kach is the Yesod. He's a mystery that it's sometime between 1896 and 1899. There's a machlekes of when he was born, which is interesting because it's not like that long ago, but we don't know exactly when he was born. He was born into a family of Hasidim, Stefanis Hasidim, which is the Rizner Hasidim in Romania. We know that his father, we know very little about his family. His father's name was Reb Moshe, and the Ribnitzer said about him that he was an Erlich Yid. And what he did speak about, when he spoke about his father, on those rare occasions, he did mention 2 avodas that were very, very dear to his father, which we're going to see, made a very big impact on the Ribnitzer's life. One is, he remembers his father carving out a hole in the ice in the river. We've read stories, we've heard stories like this, but he said that his father would make a hole in the ice in order to be able to be toivel in the winter, and he was very, very makpid on being toiveling to go to the mikveh. And he remembered his father. He remembered that his father would also be very, very makpid to get up and to say Tikkun Chatzos. Now, what's interesting here is that these are memories that he had of his father. His father died when he was 3 years old. So the Ribnitzer was only 3 years old when he lost his father. His mother brought him to the Stefanester Rebbe, who was a huge tzaddik, Reb Avram Atisyahu. She brought the child to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe actually was the one who raised the Ribnitzer. From an early age, again, there's nothing different here that we've heard about many tzaddikim, but we shouldn't take it for granted. All of Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Poskim, everything inside out. He was living in a place in Romania he moved to a place called Yas. And in Yas, he befriended the Skevera Rebbe, meaning the father of our present Rebbe, Zolgazon Zain, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, the Skevera Rebbe, and the Ribnitzer became Chavrusas, and they were very close throughout their lives. The entire Mohus of the Ribnitzer revolved around those 2 mitzvahs that we just spoke about, that his father was so connected to: Tahara, Kedushas Habris, Tahara, the mikveh, and getting up chatzos, taking chatzos, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. He's taking chatzos. Also, with the exception, of course, of Shabbos and Yom Tovim, most of his life he was fasting. He was constantly fasting. So we're talking about an Ish Chodesh, an Ish Tahar, and even while he was in Russia, because from Romania, after the war, Russia, he was known as a tremendous Baal Ma'afes, ad kedei kach that even the goyim, the communists, they used to come to him. They used to come to him for brachas and for eitzes, and there are actually articles that were written in Russian newspapers about the Wunder Rabbi, the Wonder Rabbi, and the miracles of the Ribnitzer, and we might think that the Ribnitzer, when they told the Ribnitzer that there were articles that were written in the communist newspaper, in the Russian newspaper about him, so you would think that he would have gotten upset. But this is what it says in the sefer that I read. He said, "Toiv moi," he said, "very good." Zem mashani roitza. He said, the Ribnitzer said, "That's what I want." Shakol yadabru mizah. I want everybody to talk about the miracles, these miracles. He said, "Mishum shatafkid sheli," because my whole existence in this world, my whole tafkid is laharais sheishel kim arlam. God of the Welt. My whole tachlis is to show it's the God of the Welt, that there's a God of the world. There's a God who's in charge. So the Rebbe said, let them write it up in the newspapers. He had no problems with that. That's my whole tachlis is. Is Rebbetzin, then Rebbetzin Sorika, said that we have a couple of interesting stories from her, but she said that, and it's known, people I've spoken to that saw this by him. I was never by him for Shabbos, but people said that he would, before he would make Havdalah, he would look into the becher, he would look into the wine for a few minutes. Sometimes a long time he would stare into the becher, into the kais, before he would say Bari Piagafen by Havdalah. And his Rebbetzin told over that Chaim Zanvil had mir gesagt, that Chaim Zanvil, the Rebbe told me, was geht nicht weg von dem becher, he will not turn away from the becher, bis seht nicht Eliyahu Hanavi, until he sees Eliyahu Hanavi's face in the becher, in the wine. He would not say Bari Piagafen. He told this to his Rebbetzin. He wouldn't say Bari Piagafen until he would see the face of Eliyahu Hanavi in the wine. Now, there are 1,000 stories. I dafka wanted to tell you, and I don't have the story, but there's a few things in Hebrew and Lashon Kodesh here and there, one or two things in Yiddish that I saw. But I wanted to dafka tell you something about Eliyahu Hanavi and the Ribnitzer, because it's going to come back here in this next story, which is while he was in Russia. Now, the Ribnitzer was a moil. He was a moil. And he was performing brisson on many of these Russian kids, where the family wanted to have a bris, even though they were not religious, but they wanted to have a bris, and it was with Mesiras Nefesh, because it was against the law to circumcise, and it was against the law to have a circumcision performed. So one time there was a certain Parik Ol, a communist, a Jewish guy, that he did not want to get a bris for his son, but the mother, as it often happened, the mother wanted very, very much to have the child have a bris. So the mother went to speak to the Ribnitzer. He was the secret mohel, and the mother went to speak to the Ribnitzer, and the Ribnitzer said, "We're going to plan it on the 8th day, when your husband is at work." And the Ribnitzer said not to worry. He's makabel upon himself that nothing will happen, everything's going to be okay. And if the father will come with a tiny, because the father's going to see, obviously, that his kid got circumcised. So if the father is going to come with a taina, he said, so the Ribnitzer told the baby's mother that if your husband comes with a taina, just tell him that Chaim Zanvil came and forced himself to get, he by forced gave a bris to our baby. You didn't agree. You tried to stop him, and I'm not afraid. And don't worry about it. That's another trademark of the Ribnitzer's life is absolute fearlessness. Maybe we'll get back to that later. But he said, I'm not afraid. Tell your husband. I knocked on the door and I went in with my knife and I was the one that did it. You were fighting against me and I'll back you up. In the meantime, the Ribnitzer's Rebbitzin did not want the Rebbe to do this because apparently the boy's father was a really not like wasn't a good guy. This Jewish father was not a good guy. Rebbe was, of course, terrified that the father was going to report her husband, the Rebbe, to the authorities, to the communists. So what did the Rebbetzin do? Like all good Rebbetzins, the night before the Rebbe set out for this job, she went into his bag and she took out the challah. She took out the knife. She took out the knife for the bris. Anyway, what happens like this? The Rebbe, when he would go to give bris, he went with another one of his best friends, was Reb Mendel Fortefas. Now you all heard of Reb Mendel Fortefas, the famous Chabad mashpia. Reb Mendel Fortefas and the Ribnitzer, they were like partners in crime. They were mamish. They were partners in crime, like the dynamic duo, that they would go everywhere and give these secret brisin. And the way that they worked it out is that the Ribnitzer was the Moil and Reb Mendel Fortefas was the Sandik. And they went everywhere together. The two friends, these two tzaddikim, they went to make these secret brisin at the risk of their lives. So they came to this. They came to give a bris, and this was not nearby. They had to leave. It was a whole trip to get to this place to give their bris, and of course the Rebbe opened up his bag, and the knife was gone. The Rebbitzin had stolen the knife, so that was not going to stop him. You probably know that a lot of the moilim, because they have to do priya on the bris, they have very, very sharp nails. They keep a sharp thumbnail, which they take care of to make sure to file it and keep it in good condition, so they could use it for the priya to peel off by the priya by the bris milah. Except here, the Ribnitzer said that he told the Reb Mendel Fortefas that my nail is in good condition. I can give a bris with it as well. So he's going to give a bris using his nail. So Mendel Fortefas turned white, and before he could do anything, the Ribnitzer made already a bracha. I think he's and he gives a bris to this kid with his nail, and the kid blood is gushing everywhere. There's a pachad, blood is gushing everywhere, and it looked like the baby was going to die, and the Ribnitzer took a shmata like the Moil does, and he put it into the wine, and he put it into the baby's mouth, and he stuffed it in the baby's mouth, and the Ribnitzer screamed out, and the baby started to breathe again, and the baby started to come back a little bit, and he screamed out a third time, I'm telling you, and then the baby, Reb Mendel Fortefas was the one who told over this Maisa. Then the baby was totally fine. The bleeding stopped, like as if it was like a magic. It was a nice. The bleeding just stopped, like as if the cut had been closed. The bleeding stopped, and okay, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, and the Ribnitzer and Reb Mendel Fortefas are leaving the bris. They're walking on the street, or probably running, and Reb Mendel Fortefas says to him, Chaim Zanvil, he turns to the Rebbe and he says, Chaim Zanvil, tell me the truth. You weren't afraid? There wasn't a pachad at all? So the Ribnitzer said, Bichlal, not. I wasn't afraid for 1 second. Not to give the bris, and then once I did the cutting, and he was bleeding, I wasn't afraid for a second. So Reb Mendel Fortefas again told over the Maisa, and he asked him, how could that be? the baby was going to die. We were going to get killed. All of us were going to be killed. How could that be? So the Ribnitzer said, these are the words, the exact words that he said. In the Sefer it says, Kasher Amarti, when I said, Eliyahu Malach Habris, Amoid al Yemini l'samcheni. Right? The Moel says, he invites Eliyahu Navi, Amoid al Yemini. Every Moel, whoever's giving the bris, every Moel says to Eliyahu Navi, Malach Habris, Amoid al Yemini l'samcheni. Stand by my right side and support me. Amoid al Yemini l'samcheni. He said, Re'isi es Eliyahu Navi, Oimed liyamini. I saw Eliyahu Navi himself standing by my right side. Therefore I knew that there was nothing to be afraid about. He said, why should I be afraid? Eliyahu Navi was standing by my right side. And that's exactly what happened. So Eliyahu Navi was the one who brought down that nace. So what I said before, that the Rebbitzin would say how the Rebbe every time by Havdalah would look into the wine before he made the bracha, because he wouldn't make the bracha until he saw the face of Eliyahu Navi, so he knew what Eliyahu Navi looked like. I don't know if Eliyahu Navi came in with different faces to him, but he recognized Eliyahu Navi because there were obviously times in his life where Eliyahu Navi was there. Now, when he came, eventually, he came to Yerushalayim. The first time he went from Russia to Yerushalayim, there was a tremendous tumult, a big commotion in Eretz Yisrael that the Tzaddik was coming. And the Rebbe from Toldos Aaron, the Rebbe from Toldos Aaron, was asking about him. It was Rabbi Arlof's son. He was asking about him to hear about this Tzaddik that came from Romania, from Russia, and he was told that he's a huge Baal Mofes, he's a big miracle worker. And the Rebbe from Toldos Aaron asked, I understand, I believe you that he's a Baal Mofes, that he does miracles, but I'm not asking about his miracles. I want to know about his Avodah. What's his Avodah? What's his Avodah Hashem? So he was told that he spends every night during the week, weeknights, every night, Tikkun Chatzai, sitting on the floor with ashes. He spends 4 to 5 hours saying Tikkun Chatzai, crying over the Churban Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, and crying over the tzaras of the Jewish people in the world. That's what he does for 4 or 5 hours every night. So the Toldos Aaron Rebbe said, that's, now I understand. Now I understand a person who spends 4 or 5 hours a night crying over other Jews and crying over the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So it's not a chiddush that a person like that is such a Baal Mofes. It's not a chiddush that he's a Baal Mofes. So now I'm going to share with you a Mofes that I know personally. This was told to me by a woman who is an old friend of my wife and mine, who had a connection, who was friends with the Ribnitzer Rebbitzin when the Rebbe was living in Monsey. And listen to this story, and then we're going to learn a little Torah from. We're going to have time, another 15 minutes. Maybe hold. Yeah. Then we're going to listen. Then we're going to learn a little Torah, a little piece of a Torah from Rav Nosson Braslov, excuse me, later, and that will be our entrance into the Ribnitzer for now. So I heard this. My wife and I heard this from this woman, who was there b'shas Ma'aseh when it happened. I mean, there are a lot of people that have stories. You know, the Ribnitzer moved in the clouds by Kiddush Levana. There are a lot of stories, but this one I heard from the woman who was there b'shas Ma'aseh, that I told in shul maybe 2-3 years ago. I told this over in shul. Some of you might remember that this woman who we know spent Shabbos with the Ribnitzer Rebbitzin, and at that point already, the Rebbe was not able to have any people over. He really wasn't much in the world. He wasn't speaking. Kemat was not able to speak a word. And he was just sitting by the table. So the Rebbitzin was sitting at the table with the Rebbe and with the Rebbitzin's friend, this woman that we know. And the Rebbitzin was trying to talk to the Rebbe. She wanted to try to talk to him to hear from him something. He was just sitting with his head down with a blank look. He was not talking. And the Rebbetzin started to cry. She was very, very upset about the Rebbe's condition. She didn't want the Rebbe to see that she was crying. So she jumped out of a chair. She wanted to run out of the dining room. And there was a svarm trunk that was on the side. And she knocked into some sefer when she was running out. And the sefer fell down on the floor. So the Rebbetzin jumped to grab the sefer, to kiss it. And then she opened up the sefer and she started reading from the sefer. And she began to cry and to laugh and to laugh and to cry. And she looked up from the sefer, and the Rebbe looked at her. And this, again, our friend told us that their eyes met, and the Rebbe's eyes were wide open, and he looked at the Rebbe, and then he smiled, and he nodded his head. Now, what happened? And she sat back down, and she was very happy, and she told what happened. The Rebbe had told her before he lost his ability to communicate. He said that I'm going to speak to you in different ways. One of the ways that I'm going to speak to you is if it's going to happen that you'll knock into a sefer by mistake, or a sefer falls down on the floor. Open the sefer and read what it says. The first thing that you see in the sefer is what I want to tell you. That's what he told. The Rebbetzin told us to her. So she said, it never happened, but then there it was. I knocked into the sefer when I was running out of the room, and I don't know what the sefer was. I bent down, and I opened up the sefer, and because he told me that I should look inside the sefer. Whenever that happens, I open up the sefer, and I open up to the page, and I read the words where it said on the pasuk, "Hashem beirach es Avram bakol." Hashem benched Avram bakol. Okay, Rashi says whatever that means. But Hashem gave him a bracha bakol, and in this sefer it said, some of you might remember, it said in the sefer, Hashem beirach es Avram bakol is the Rosh Tevis bakol. Beis Chav Lamed is the Rosh Tevis. B'koach kain lo. Hashem gave Avraham Avinu the bracha to have the wisdom to know when to say yes and when to say no, to know what should be and what should not be, when it is right and when it is wrong. That's the biggest bracha in the world. So that's the letters Bakol. And I read those words in the sefer, and I looked up at the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, I looked at the Rebbe, and he was smiling, and he went, "Cain, yes." So that's a meifus that I heard from this woman. That was by the Ribnitzer's table. So the koach of Tzaddik Geyser, B'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, in our generation, the kind of open miracles that were seen by the Ribnitzer, I think the only way to understand is like the Rebbe from Toldos Aaron said, that somebody whose heart is broken over the suffering of Jews and cries every night 4 or 5 hours sitting on the floor. So the worlds open up to him. The Lelever Rebbe said when he was in Yerushalayim at that time, Rav Moshe Mordechai, the Lelever Rebbe said, Avodosa b'kodesh, the avodah of the Ribnitzer is what? Luk m'shchintem ha'afar. To lift up the Shechina, to lift up the Shechina from the dirt, to lift up the covet of the Jewish people. And that's why he was given, because of his love for Am Yisrael, he was given such an unbelievable koyach to lift up our spirits with moifsim that weren't seen for generations, to see such open miracles that they saw by the Ribnitzer, his Mesiras Nefesh, for Am Yisrael, for Jews, that we saw from the story about he risking his life, him and Reb Mendel, and his Ahavas Yisrael was something from an earlier time. So we should keep that in mind before we learn this Torah from Reb Nosson, a little bit of this Torah. We should keep that in mind, that the tzaddik we're going to be at in a few minutes, that he was the biggest Oyev Yisrael, and with the koch of his Ahavas Yisrael, he was Poel Yeshuas. And we should have that in mind. The koch of tzaddik of the in the Shiur last week, when the drasha, no, not in the drasha, maybe it was by Lag Baimer. I spoke about this a little bit, Lag Baimer, that Gedolim Tzaddikim b'misasam yoisim b'chayei, that the koch of the tzaddik is greater in his death than even when he was alive. So he's going to have nachis that a couple of chevra come from Woodmere and from some other places. A couple of chevra are coming to visit him and to daven by his seeing. Especially, we're going to say the tefillah of the Shlach Chodesh. It's Erev Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and we're going to say the tefillah of the Shlach Chodesh for our children and for our grandchildren, and it's for all Yiddish kinder. It's for all Jewish children and grandchildren. But all of Am Yisrael are his children, and there's no question that by our being there, that it's an unbelievable schus that it was worked out by the Chaverim that we should be at his seeing. Davke Erev Rosh Chodesh to daven to say the Shlach Chodesh is tefillah. To say the tefillah of the Shlach Chodesh, which I spoke by the care of the Shlach Chodesh a few years ago. I don't know if you remember what I said over there. It's a long time ago. But the union of saying that tefillah and the connection that we have through the tefillah of the Shlach Chodesh to bring Yeshuas for our children and for all Jewish children. Because even if our children are doing well, although everybody has inyanim that we have to worry about, if not our children, our grandchildren, our friends' children, our nieces, our nephews, whatever. There are plenty of things to worry about. So we're going to be by the scene of the Ribnitzer, who had a very big opening, Bakadosh Baruch Hu, of Tzadik Goyz, Bakadosh Baruch Hu, Mekayim. And Elio Malach Abris, Oy Mili, Mili Samcheni. You know, maybe, I don't know if we're going to be Zerch to see Elio Navi. We'll probably see a few other Jews there. Maybe one of them will be Elio Navi. But we certainly can have the Amunah that there's a special presence of Elio Navi, even though Elio Navi is a Kohen. The Gemara says in the Parakah Makabel, Bav Metzia, learns Xavier Shavim, Kona Kinesi, like it says by Pinchas, it says by Elio that Elio Navi was a Kohen. So why would a Kohen be in a Beis HaChaim? So then we can get into the whole pilpul of being Metamet Tzadikim, of a Kohen going to the Tzadik of it, the Kever of a Tzadik. Benkach or Benkach. We have the right to say, Elio Malach Abris, Hamoidli Yemini Samcheni, in the schus of this great Tzadik who's buried in this place that we're going to be at in a few minutes. Now, the Torah that I want to share with you a few minutes. How long am I talking already? A long time. Ah, you're driving. I don't mean to. How long already? 33 minutes. Another few minutes. So, at the very beginning of Likutei Halachos, and this is what I meant by setting a certain mahalach, a tone for the trip. This is our first Rosh Chodesh trip. We're making a Rosh Chodesh trip to bring together Rosh Chodesh. So all of the Diburim have to be Rosh Chodesh Dik. It's also Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Matan Torah, but the Iker is that we're getting together for Rosh Chodesh. So in the Likutei Halachos, at the very beginning, is the piece of Torah in Hilchos Hashkamas HaBoker, where Ribnitzer speaks about waking up in the morning and Kiddush Levana, Rosh Chodesh, and waking up in the night for Tikkun Chatzos. So I want to share with you a few sentences from Likutei Halachos. So listen, and I'll explain it as I go along. How far are we away? Oh, top of it. Okay. So he's speaking here about the Abba Parshiyos, and he says, "Achakach Karin Parshas HaChodesh." He said, "Bechinas Kiddush HaChodesh." That's the theme of our trip. Rosh Chodesh, Kiddush HaChodesh. Bechinas Milui Halavanim Mipkimasa. So I'm going to talk about tonight, as I show the February, the moon's darkness being illuminated, the pagam of the Levana, the damaged moon being repaired. That's what Rosh Chodesh is about. Rav Nosson says that when we're not in a good place, when a Jew is not doing well, that is a bechina of pagam halavana, the Jewish people compared to the moon. And each one of us is compared to the moon. So when the moon is missing, when the moon is not whole, it's a simon of you and I not being whole. Again, we'll talk more about that tonight. But that's the bechina pagam halavana, kitrug ha'yerech, the whole ma'aseh with the moon and the sun, the kitrug of the yerech. From there, all of our aveiros come from that issue of the imperfect moon, of the moon losing its light. Okay, so this first piece in Likkutei Halachos is going on the famous Torah of Azamar, Reish Pei Gimel, and Likkutei Moran for Rabbi Nachman, which they need a finding in the Likkutei Torah in yourself and finding the Likkutei Torahs in other Jews. So Ibn Nassim says something so magnificent. When a Jew is Misoira, or might say Ba'atzman Likkutei Torah, even though he looks at his life and his life is dark, like a dark winter night, and his life is dark. But he looks at his life and he's able to detect an Nakuda Torah. Like the famous story about the Ribnitzer moving the clouds away, because it was the last night of Kiddush Levana, and he moved the clouds away, and he was able to reveal a tiny, tiny piece of the light of the moon in that winter sky. So Rabbi Nassim says, when a Jew is able to come and to find even a tiny little point of light, the light of a star, the light of the moon, a little good inside of himself, that is the avoda of what? Of repairing the moon, of bringing the light back to the darkened moon. A Jew finds a little bit of life inside of himself. He's bringing light to the darkened moon. That's the bechina, he says, of Kiddush HaChodesh, of the first sign of the light of the moon. Until now, he's been down on himself, he's given up on himself, but he has this hisayrus for whatever reason, and he detects, like the Adam, he detects some little sparkle of moonlight in his life, and that he calls, Rabbi Nassim said, that's a bechina of ruach of Kiddush HaChodesh. Ki ikka Kiddush HaChodesh l'ayidei bechina now. Ki b'tchilas HaChodesh beish Yiroin Salaban l'kadosh Yosef Bezdin azay Hachana b'daka moed moed. When it comes time at the beginning of the month, when you're crossing over, just like this is where we are today, and you're crossing over from the end of the month to the beginning, then the moon, the Bezdin goes to see with the Adam, and it's only a tiny, tiny, tiny little, you could hardly see it in the sky. Tana b'daka moed moed. Azay hirak b'bchinas nakuda. The moon at that point, at the end of the month, where we are now, going into Rosh Chodesh, the moon is only a nakuda, a point. Hainu b'chinas nakuda toiva. Rabbi Nassim says that's what Rabbi Nachman is talking about, that point of light inside of yourself, that nakuda toiva, that you could hardly see. She b'chinas shchayra nivanava, as it says in Shiur Shirim. I am black, I am dark, but I am beautiful. Meaning, even though I am dark, I'm able to see a little bit of beauty. This is talking about the end of the month. That's today, when the Levana of the moon is betachlis hamid. It's the tiniest. In other words, it's not that you don't see the moon; you see the tiniest little spark of the moon. When you don't see it, you just give up. Now you see a tiny little spark of the moon. You bring Adam, and the Adam are able to find. The Adam are able to see a nakuda ketana. They see a tiny little piece of the moon. And then what? The Bezdin is Makadosh to Chodesh. We'll talk about how Bezdin does that tomorrow. We'll talk about the Rambam a little bit tomorrow. There's a Shiur sometime tomorrow. Because all you need is to find at least one nakuda. When you're at your lowest and darkest point, find one nakuda taiva, one little piece of the moon. Like Rabbi Nachman says, you're able to then come into the world of tshuva and to build another nakuda, to bring yourself around. That's the inyan of tikkun and milui, filling the light of the moon. Therefore, the Bezdin would say, and all the people, the Jews that were standing there with the Bezdin, when the Adam would come, they would say, Eidah on Kiddush HaChodesh, and the Bezdin would scream out, what? Mekudesh, Mekudesh. The Bezdin would scream, Mekudesh, Mekudesh. Okay, and the Kudah Levad and his Kachna, it's like the Tzaddikim would scream out at all the Jews there, that every Jew is Mekudesh, Mekudesh. You who think that there's nothing in you, you who think that you're totally dark, that you're black, you have no good left in you. Mekudesh, Mekudesh. Because the whole avoid of a Jew is to judge himself and the others, the kaf schus, to try to find that nakuda taiva. And then all the Jews who were present would repeat after the Bezdin, and all the Jews that were there would scream out, Mekudash, Mekudash. They were screaming it, and they were saying, now the moon, through this Makudesh, that little spark of light is going to grow and grow and grow, and the light of the moon will be filled again, which is the need of Mashiach. And so Kedush also, I think the Kudesh or Levad Sharo Mi Alavon is a Baasam B'Chikanal. Kaidei Kitruk HaYerech and Nismata Faz Notzna Hashem Yisborach Has HaKachab L'Hafiz Daita. So Chazal tell us in the Medrash and the Bracious there that the moon was, of course, very, very sad after she was diminished. The moon was diminished after the whole Maisa. The moon was made small, and then her light was taken, and the moon was very sad. So Hashem Yisborach gave the moon all of the little points of light in the galaxy, all of the stars. L'Hafiz Daita to be Menachem, to give Nechama to the moon. So the stars are those little points of light in the sky to give Nechama to the moon. Kilu, to say, Rashi brings down, what are the little points of light in the sky at night? Rabbi Nassim says, those are the Nekudas Toivus. Those are the good points of light that you could find in any Jew. They're good things. And if you look hard in another Jew, and if you look hard in yourself, you'll be able to come to bring that person and yourself mamish into the kafschus. And that's what the pasuk says in Daniel about the tzaddikim. The tzaddikim who are melamed on other Jews. What is the mashal that we find in Daniel? It says umatzdike harabim kekachavim. That the tzaddikim who are matzdike harabim, who are always trying to find good things, nekudas tayvus, points of light in other Jews, they are compared to the moon, to the stars. Matzdike harabim kekachavim. They're like the stars. Kekachavim harabim. Hainu sadike hador. This is the way of the Baal Shem HaKadosh and all the Talmidei Baal Shem. With the Ikin of the Baal Shem and the Talmidei Baal Shem is what? All the Tzaddik here should done him as a kol kaf schus. The way of the Baal Shem HaKadosh and the Talmidei Baal Shem was always to try to find those stars, those points of light, the little piece of the moon. Afilu Poish Yisrael be'emes. Even the biggest sinners, even the worst Jews, the Tzaddikim were trying to find, but even the biggest Poish Yisrael stars, little stars. Little twinkle, twinkle, little star in every Jew. Therefore, the tzaddikim are called matzdike harabim kekachavim. The ones who find good in other Jews and in themselves, kekachavim compared to the stars. And it says, and then it goes on the pasuk, "Askilim yazhiru kezoyer harakia," and they will shine like the brightness of the sky, which is why the Zohar is called the Zohar, and that's why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai brings this pasuk many times in the Zohar Kodesh. From Askilim Yaziu Kezohar Harakia or Masdike Haram Kekacham. That's the pasuk. The pasuk is from Askilim Yaziu Kezohar Harakia or Masdike Haram Kekacham. And we're going to be learning tonight in Mitzvah Shem by the Farbrengen. We're going to learn a piece of Zohar that's going to help us understand what we're talking about now. Hanish Ikvas Mashiach, especially Rabbi Nassim says it with the end of time. Ikvas the Mashiach. The Soifa Kates shows his Gaber Chasar Shalom HaSitrach. And at the end of time, the other side, the side of evil, of darkness, is going to be very strong. Was the Agorla Berivat Serif Bechinas his Barbi Islamnu Yitzar for Rabban, it says there in Sefer Daniel, and then it's going to be very hard for Jews to hold on. And many Jews, many people are going to fall away at the end of time. Was the Ikka Tikkun at the end of time of how to bring Jews back, and how to do tshuva, and how to hold on to our children, our grandchildren, to our brothers and sisters, all Jews is how? Only with this avodah of what? Of Nekudas Toivus, of Matzdike Harabim Kekechavim. V'yim to Nekudas Toivus, afilu abchusim moed, to find the Nekudas Toivus, even the lowest Jews. So the Ikka Avodah Tzadikim. V'ayidei zed davka Yov Mashiach. Ayidei zed davka Yov Mashiach. You hear the tzchus that we have, that we're going to daven by the Ribnitzer, whose whole avodah was Tikkun Chatzos, which we'll see in a minute, means in the middle, in the darkest time of night, to find a Nekuda of Or, in the middle of the night, to break the Chodesh, to break the momentum of darkness by getting up and saying Tikkun Chatzos, to stop the sleep and to daven. By this tzaddik, whose whole inyan was Ahavas Yisrael, he says, Yov Mashiach, maybe Mashiach, because that's the whole inyan of Mashiach. And that's why Rabbi Shimon, that's why it's called the Zohar Kodesh. Maskilim Kezohar Hakim Matzdike Kekachavim. Nekudas Toivus, and that's what it means. Halul Kol Koich Ve'or, meaning the Nekudas Toivus. V'zeh B'chinas, and now we're going to end V'zeh b'chinas kimas chatzos, and this is the inyan of getting up chatzos to say tikkun chatzos, which is the biggest inyan of the Ribnitzer was tikkun chatzos. Shetzrichen l'shaber toikef hashena. Tikkun chatzos means when you're most sleepy, when you're mamish in the deepest place of sleep, to break that, to stop the sleep. There's a momentum of darkness. There's a momentum of sleepiness, of drowsiness, of doing aveirus, of being disconnected from kedusha. And what's tikkun chatzos? I'm not going to let this darkness go on. I'm going to break my sleep. Kimas chatzos. The beginning says in the pasuk, David Melech said, "Ura kavaydi, ura hanevel." Zeh beginning kino. The David Melech would get up at chatzos. Remember, the Gemara says there in Brachas at the beginning of Daf Gimel, the David Melech would get up by chatzos. Ura kavaydi, he would call out his harp to start playing. Zeh beginning kino shel David, which is Mashiach. And Shahim Menagin al Yidei Ruach Tzafon, a northern wind would come, and the harp of David Melech would begin to play on its own by chatzos when David Melech was sitting there. What does it mean? Bechinas ruach toiva, which Nashon was explaining before, that the music comes from separating the good notes from the bad notes, and there would be a beautiful song, because inside of every Jew there's a beautiful song. You just have to know how to find the nekudas toivas, the right strings to pull. You have to know which strings, which buttons, which keys to touch. But inside every Jew there's nekudas toivas, there's beautiful songs. From Vitomer, I feel betachlis hashena. Even when a person is betachlis hashena, is so sleepy. I feel means sleepy means he's in his lowest place. Still by a Jew, Ma'arav Tuvcha Shet Safant, that's David HaMelech. Nekudas Toivus, Menashman, Mekina Shel David. And then there would be this beautiful song that would be played. There's the Indian of Halul B'Nevo B'Chino, and it says there in the pasuk we say every day, Halul B'Nevo B'Chino, Halul Kol Koichvei Or. All the stars of the sky in the darkness begin to sing. So Ribnitzer says that the harp of David HaMelech would play on its own. And that would cause this awakening by midnight. The toik of Hashem, when you're most sleepy, that's tikkun chatzos. Therefore, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people got, while we were still living in the darkness of Mitzrayim, we were still in Egypt, we hadn't left yet, was what? HaChodesh is Elechem. Kiddush HaChodesh, tonight, right? Tonight, Rosh Chodesh. You parish HaChodesh on a Kiddush HaChodesh on your mitzvah, Yishon Shestav B'Yisrael, when we were still in Mitzrayim, when we were still in the darkness of Mitzrayim. Because the ikka way to get out of Mitzrayim, and the ikka way to get out of the Golus we're in right now is what? Bechinas. Now here comes to the story of the Ribnitzer. Hashem said about us when we were in Mitzrayim, I see you wallowing in your blood. Heinrich Yisrael Meluch Lachim. What does it mean that Hashem saw us wallowing in blood, in dirt? Because we were Meluch Lachim, we were in the filth of Mitzrayim. In Avodah Zarah, and all the filth of Mitzrayim. In the 49 places of Tumah. Hashem had Rachmanis. Why? Because Hashem never ever stopped seeing the stars inside of us. The Nekudas Toivus, that little sliver of the moon inside every Jew. I feel it toikif tumas Mitzrayim, even in the darkness of Mitzrayim, because that's why it took place. When was it? Kachatzois Laila. When was it? When was the Gula? By Chatzois. Okay, therefore, I feel betoikev adam melchluchim. Therefore, even when it's betoikev adam melchluchim, when it looks like the baby is going to die, when it looks like Am Yisrael is going to die, the Ribnitzer screams out, "Vaymelach b'damai chayi, b'damai chayi." Higam sham. Even there, Reb Nasser says a Jew can find the kudas toivus and chiyas. He can find the chiyas and life and the kudas toivus. Even there, gam sham, even in Mitzrayim. So there's en negolu. Okay, mitzvah rishonish and stav Yisrael's parshas hachodesh. The mitzvah of tikkun of kiddush hachodesh. Shebchinis kachatzais halayla ani yotzei b'sarich Mitzrayim. And that's the whole thing of kachatzais halayla ani yotzei Mitzrayim. That's why the Gulut began at that time of kachatzais halayla. And that's the Indian of Tikkun Chatzos, and that's the Indian of Pesach. The Akash Baruch Hu then was skipping over steps, and he brought us to him, and he brought us to Har Sinai. And Bez Hashem, the same way that Hashem saw the Nekudas Tovos in us then, he should see them now. and we're going to be by a tzaddik who never ever stopped seeing those Nekudas Tovos, even by the lowest Jews, the biggest communists. He saw in them that their true Ratzon was that the baby should have a bris, and that's the end of that story. Is that father was very proud in the end that the baby was gemalt, and so we should be zeicher to see nisim and the flows and the schus of this balmoifis, and Mr. Hashem, this will be our last Rosh Chodesh Sivan in Golus, and we'll go with all the tzaddikim to Yerushalayim to be Makash Chodesh in front of the Sanhedrin, together with the Sanhedrin and Mashiach Sekain. I'll see you soon. Mr. Hashem.